Welcome to my first video on fantasy reality. And today I'm going to talk about centaurs. An interesting creature, the centaur. You have... Please ignore some of the background noise. It's just after the 4th of July. And do try to ignore the wind a little bit. Like I said, centaurs, interesting creature, usually depicted as having the upper body of a man joined to the body of a horse. Usually. Sometimes the ears are those of a human, sometimes they're more like that of a horse. And there's a number of different varieties of centaurs out there, depending on where they are located. I mean, you set them in Africa, they might look more like a zebra. And, of course, depending on the horses and in your local area, they might look different. If you set them in... if you want to create your centaurs as, say, in an Old West setting, they might have the horse body of a Mustang. Or you want to set them in like a Viking sort of area, you might make them look more like those really hairy, those shaggy ponies and whatnot. It all depends on, of course, it all depends on how you want to create them. Yeah, a lot of artistic license in that one. Now, the one thing I'm going to talk about is, would they let somebody ride them? And to understand that, you got to know a little bit about horses. And let's face it, you're sitting on their back, their spinal column, and depending on the size of your adventurer, 200 or more pounds, that's a significant amount of weight. And as it is in real life, horses need to be brought up to, they need to be trained in order to carry weights. And I might be wrong on that one. If you know horses better than I do, please correct me. But for the most part, they need to get used to the idea of having someone or something on their back. And because when you think about it, the back of a horse is quite vulnerable. I mean, there's a lot of different predators out there, like mountain lions, wolves, a lot of the big cats. I don't know about bears, but they get onto an animal's back. They can't get that predator off of them. Somebody's having lunch. It could be a similar mindset for a centaur. They may not be able to reach all the way towards their back. I mean, if you've ever ridden on a horse, there's at least one practice where, for like say therapeutic reasons, where you can like reach back and try to grab the back of your saddle. I doubt you're going to be able to grab far enough to touch the base of their tail or anything like that. Now, with a centaur, they're going to be a little bit more forward. Again, that's a little bit more reach. I mean, maybe they can bend their human spine a little bit to possibly reach back there, but point is, they might not like some random person getting on their back. And would you blame them? But there's another thing you could take into consideration. How much does the Centaur trust the person that wants to ride them? That's a factor right there. I guess you could really equate it to like a hug. The average person, they see some random stranger, they're not going to want to hug them. And likewise, that random stranger is normally not going to, despite the fact that, let's say they've had a few too many drinks. You know, they're like, hey, and all that sort of stuff. And, well, you might not want them to hug you, because best case scenario, they're going to smell, and they're going to leave that smell on your clothes. Next best case scenario, they might have had a little too much and throw up on you. They just leave you with a mess. Then you get the worst case scenarios. Best worst case scenario, they pick your pockets. Worst case scenario, you're dead. Similar sort of thing could be with a centaur. If they don't trust that guy, they're not going to let somebody on their back. On the other hand, again with the hug, if the person is your friend and maybe they're in a celebratory mood because, hey, my wife's, found out that the wife is, after so many years, they finally found out that, yay, we got a kid coming, and here they're in a good mood, and of course you will tell them, yep, I'm happy for you. So yeah, you're going to accept that hug from them if they're giving away hugs and you don't mind them hugging. Similar situation could be with the centaur, that if they trust that person, it's like, okay, buddy, you can ride on my back for a little bit, and and another possible reason is if the person's a kid. Kids, they do all kinds of things, and they're going around grabbing everybody. So, it's like, Uncle Mike, they come running up to you and give you a hug. It's like, hey, you doing, kiddo? Despite the fact that maybe you're just a good friend of their mother or father. Kids can come up running to you, calling you Uncle Mike or Aunt Lucy or whatever. A similar situation could be with a centaur. They're on good terms with the parents, and you got this kid like, hey, can I ride you, Uncle Cenarius? Okay. You're going to tolerate from a lot from a kid that you wouldn't tolerate from an adult, for the most part. Another reason why a centaur could possibly allow rider, well, kind of correlates with one of our oldest needs, and that is the need to feed. And that's to say, we need food to survive. And let's face it, your average human needs about 2,000 calories of food per day, possibly more if they're more physically active. So, an adventure sort, 3,000 calories, easy. And of course, you got different dietary requirements and whatnot, so there's all that. A horse needs at least 5 times as much, at least 10 to 15,000 calories per day, possibly more, depending on their size, as well as their activity level. And so you can see a centaur requiring at least as much calories per day. And you need food. So, and sometimes you're lucky. You live in a place where there's fruit hanging from the trees. Or maybe you're really good at hunting, and let's face it, if you're a centaur, you could probably hold up a decent gallop of like 12 or more miles per hour. And maybe you can run, and if you're not, and if a centaur's an omnivore, they could easily, at the very least, give a good chase. And if they're a decent archer, bingo, venison. Or, and hey, you got food right there. Or maybe you're not into hunting. Maybe they're not. But what if hunting isn't so good? What if foraging isn't so good? Then they're going to need money or the local equivalent. And that usually implies getting a job of some sort. And sometimes you can do that by working for a farmer. Especially if they're short on a horse. And let me double check something. Just double checking. I'm seeing if this camera's running. Like I said, a centaur, if they're going to need, in order to get food, odds are they're going to need a job. And let's say they decide to work for a farmer, let's say that the farmer's horse or oxen or cattle or whatever it is that they normally use that they normally hook up the plow to has a broken leg or anything like that. And depending on the pride of your centaur, they might decide, okay, I need the money, so they're going to let, and this kind of goes along with whether or not they don't let somebody ride them. They might allow that farmer to hitch up the plow to their backside, so that way they can plow the field, so that way the farmer can, and they can get money that way. And then another possibility is, due to the fact that they can travel great distances with little to no problems, they can deliver messages from one village to another. Sort of like the Pony Express. And of course, given how dangerous worlds can be, another possibility is maybe a caravan guard. You know, no bandits here today. You know, because they need money in order to buy food. And that brings into another possibility as to why they might allow somebody to ride them. You have somebody, if there's a taxi cab service of some sort, and let's say riding a centaur means I am so wealthy I can ride on the back of another person. You know, as far as a human is concerned, it's like, in a centaur, it's like, okay, I'm getting X amount of money for this, I should buy Y amount of food, okay, I can tolerate this. Let's face it, a number of us, well, we have jobs, and some of them aren't glamorous, let's be honest with you on that, but we do them because it's a paycheck, and it puts food on the table. So, right there's a good reason why a centaur wouldn't mind somebody being on their back as part of a taxi service. Or perhaps if they're being a good Samaritan, as it were, that they're out traveling they come across somebody who got into attack by bandits and their leg is messed up and they can't exactly walk, so maybe the Centaur will help out and allow the other guy to get beyond their back, and so they can get the fella to get the guy to a healer. That's a possibility, and in fact that one right there, that's in Dungeons and Dragons as an acceptable reason for a Centaur to let somebody on their back, is that the other guy's injured, there isn't a spare mount, they're trying to save the guy's life. And that's one reason. Money, like I said, is always a big reason. That is, you know, for letting somebody on their back or being hitched to some sort of plow or a wagon or a cart or anything. I mean, it could even be in like the contract that a Centaur has. If they're a guard in a caravan, that, let's say you have a merchant, they have a horse, very nice horse, you know, it's hooked up to the cart, and the cart is filled with medicine, for instance, which is required to be taken from this village to the village over here. And let's say at some point between the villages, a group of bandits attacks, and the guy's horse gets killed, or wounded enough to the point that it cannot pull the load. In which case, a Centaur might allow itself to be hitched to this cart, but it might have in the contract that if forced to pull a wagon, he must be paid extra money. And money is always good. So, like I said, there's a number of reasons why the Centaur might allow somebody to ride their back. And there's of course reasons why they probably wouldn't. Mainly that reasons as to why they wouldn't let somebody on their back is because the back is a very vulnerable spot. But reasons as to why they, and normally you wouldn't want somebody on your back because it might be a little bit painful. But if a Centaur was in a world where the possibility of having somebody on their back was there, one thing that they could do is have a special set of clothes, which on their back, which might equate to the equivalent of a blanket, similar to what most people who go horseback riding have on their horses. They put on a blanket, which is like a really thick piece of cloth, which helps cushion the weight of the rider. And another thing that they might have on their back is the equivalent of a saddle, which again kind of helps you out when helps them stay on the Centaur, in this case a Centaur, or on the horse for that matter. And reins, well, depending on the clothing that this guy's wearing, such as if he's a courier or a guard, and he might have like a special set of reins that are more like they're strapped to like a couple of loops around his waist, the human torso part. That's like more of a suggestion where it's like, you might want to go this way, or you might want to go this way. Of course, the Centaur probably doesn't need to listen to that. But still, let's say the Centaur's blind. Yeah, you might want a little bit of help. Okay, which way's fifth? This way? Okay. Kind of useful if the rider's non-verbal. And of course, another reason is, let's say they are a fighter, a warrior. And I gotta thank YouTuber Shadiversity for this one, for their suggestion on best weapons a Centaur could employ. And that is if they are part of is if they're in a fight and one of their fellow warrior, a fellow fighter, is like realizes that the enemy is, oh boy, and it's like, we might want to get out of here. Yeah, you might want that other guy's like meant to say to get on the Centaur's like, we need to get out of here. And it's quite possible that, yeah, you're gonna allow if there's danger, you're gonna allow your buddies to ride your back in order to get out of danger. And it's possible this might actually double the effectiveness of their fighting capabilities, because one, you got two pairs of eyes, because one can look this way, the other guy, the rider's looking that way, and whatnot. Two sets of ears, like, I heard something. Yeah, so did I. I think it's coming from that direction. And let's say the Centaur is armed with a big pole arm, like a halberd or a pole axe. He's a swinging, taking out the enemies left and right. And let's say the rider, maybe he's armed with a sword for in case somebody gets a little too close for comfort, or bow and arrow. Sort of like a mounted archer or knight. And of course you got the big guy, and of course you got the Centaur with a really big pole arm, just as they clear on out of there. So those are perfectly good reasons as to why a Centaur would let somebody on their back. Now, I'm not saying that every Centaur is going to do that. I'm just saying some might consider the idea. Well, that's it for this episode of Fantasy Reality. See you later.